First of all, it's not just about what the vice president said about Ilhan Omar. News getting to us now is saying that the Somalian government is requesting for an extradition of Ilhan Omar. That is to say, they want her extradited out of the United States of America due to the fraudulent cases that her name is being called upon, allegedly. Let's delve into it.
She lectured us about democracy. She lectured us about justice. She lectured us about who belongs in America and who doesn't. For 8 years, Ilhan Omar has stood at her podium in the United States Congress, a Congress she sits in as an allegedly fraudulent citizen, and she pointed her finger at Americans, at Trump, at the very country that rescued her from a war zone. But this week, everything changed, because now it's not just the DOJ looking at her. It's not just the House Oversight Committee. It's not just Vice President J.D. Vance confirming on national media that he knows she committed immigration fraud. No. Now it's a foreign nation getting involved. They just sent a message to the Department of Justice that's sending chills down Ilhan Omar's spine. We're not talking deportation anymore. We're now officially talking, I kid you not, extradition.
Questions about federal tax fraud, federal immigration fraud, federal student loan fraud, and state violations of perjury, bigamy, kickbacks, and acts of campaign fraud abuse in Boston, Washington, New York, Chicago, and Florida.
And Ilhan Omar, I hope this is part of it, but she married her brother, supposedly. I mean, there's a lot of documentation. That means she's here illegally and she's a congresswoman. And I hope you're going to be looking at that, or somebody is, all right? Because she's one of the ringleaders here. She's bad news, really bad news. She's so bad for our country.
So the calls are intensifying to get Ilhan Omar deported, so much so that the Trump administration is even responding to and investigating the very real allegation that she is not just an anti-American communist asset operating within our country, but furthermore, it very strongly does appear that she committed immigration fraud multiple different times to get into this country to begin with, which according to U.S. law can institute a denaturalization and deportation procedure. While it is very rare, these things can and do happen. As a matter of fact, we recently did just see some legal cases of successful denaturalizations happen here under the Trump administration. And so, of course, this is a very real conversation that is now happening. I'm not exactly here to promise you anything, because although the evidence is very rampant, we obviously know how our justice system works. And that's obviously not just if you are a liberal, but specifically if you are a liberal politician, you're allowed to get away with anything. Doesn't matter if the Trump administration tries, they can bring the case. What's going to happen? Some woke judge is going to toss it out. So again, not here to promise anything, but I would like to point out what is perhaps the most hilarious development in this chronicle yet, which is that the Republic of Somaliland is now getting involved and is even trying to help provide the United States with receipts that she actually did commit that very immigration fraud, and is even now offering to extradite her and take her back into their country on behalf of Americans who do not want them there. Now, before you ask, if you're wondering what exactly Somaliland is, it is essentially a breakaway region of Somalia, by the way, the much more geopolitically stable and somewhat more prosperous part of the country there. And it's recognized by some governments worldwide to be its own independent nations. Others no. My understanding actually is that the first Trump administration recognized Somaliland for certain geopolitical reasons. I think it has to do with economic access to the Horn of Africa and all that stuff. But for whatever reason, they are now paying us back and basically want to take Ilhan Omar back to their own country and even potentially try her in their own criminal courts, because of the fact that, as we've told you before, her family are not just some ordinary refugees that were fleeing violence as she has painted herself to be, right? She has very close family ties with the murderous, violent, genocidal, evil communist regime that ran Somalia until 1991. And the reason her family fled was not because there were some random villagers trying to get away from terrorists. No, they fled specifically because the Somali population would have been obviously extremely angry with them. And as it pertains currently to Somaliland, who is still pissed off about the very war crimes and crimes against humanity that were committed by the family friends of Ilhan Omar. By the way, keep in mind, she always lectures us about genocide and all that stuff, right? To this very day, is basically still going after her and wants the United States to send her to their country. So we'll tell you about this story here today. And I repeat, this is actually 100% real. Like, Somaliland wants to take Ilhan Omar back and is totally leaning into all of the calls to get her deported here in this country. So we'll get into it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support. It also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, so let us, of course, start by reminding everyone what we are talking about. I mean, first and foremost, it is believed even circa 1991 when they came into this country, the Omars basically changed their name to try to trick the U.S. into believing that they were not actually linked to the communist regime. Because as you know, right, this is basically still right after, but still largely, right, Cold War America. You know, usually we granted asylum and refugee status to the anti-communist people, right? Not literally the ones involved in the communist government. So it's believed that she basically lied, her family, I should say, basically lied about that. But of course, the very famous allegation is that which she married her brother, confirmed by court records, in order to basically allow him to stay in the country here via marriage. The track record here does seem to be strong. The whole timeline, by the way, is strange because she allegedly married her brother in 2009, but the entire time it was simply just a religious marriage, and then they only consummated it legally in 2017. And then only a couple of months later already filed for divorce, and she went on to go marry that consultant guy that she's married to now. So, of course, the whole thing does seem to be pretty obvious. And even over the weekend, J.D. Vance, in an interview with in an interview with Benny Johnson, I should say, officially confirmed that the Trump administration is basically looking into it. Take a listen.
About Ilhan Omar and Tim Walz.
Exactly.
And obviously, Ilhan Omar, the president and the White House have been out saying that she married her brother, that there is immigration fraud going on here. These are deportable denaturalization offenses. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, so we actually think that Ilhan Omar definitely committed immigration fraud against the United States of America. And I talked to Stephen Miller about this actually recently. We're trying to look at what the remedies are. That's the thing that we're trying to figure out, is what are the legal remedies now that we know that she's committed immigration fraud? How do you go after her? How do you investigate her? How do you actually do the thing? How do you build the case necessary to get some justice for the American people? There's a related issue, Benny, which is she has been at the center of a lot of the worst fraudsters in the Somalian community. So do I know that Ilhan Omar was aware that the Quality Leering Center was defrauding the American people? I'm not certain of it, but we at least need to investigate it, because if people can commit wrongdoing without even the fear that they're going to be found out, that's a fundamental problem. So I'm worried about the immigration fraud. I'm also worried about, what did Ilhan Omar know about what was happening in the Somali community, and why was nobody looking into it until, frankly, Donald Trump came along?
Yeah, so the official stance of the Trump administration and our federal government is not even whether Ilhan Omar committed immigration fraud. They're saying 100% yes. It's simply a question of, what do we do about it? What are the legal remedies? And again, as I said, the fact that she is a congresswoman and has some standing, although it's completely crooked, backwards, and shouldn't work this way, you certainly know she's going to use that as some shield of her legal protection, right? Oh, I got into Congress, therefore you can't do anything towards me without making it look like a political witch hunt or something, which frankly you could argue to a degree was almost a part of her grand scheme this entire time, right? Because, it's almost so cartoonish. It's like a caricature. It's like the bad stereotype of exactly what we paint negative immigration to be, what her family has done, and basically, honestly, I'd argue a lot of that Somali situation in Minnesota, right? It's almost cartoonish how bad this situation is. Because Ilhan Omar, again, descends from what? Actual murderous communists, right? That's what her family are. So they lie to America. They come to this country pretending that's not what they are, okay, as fake refugees. They get here. You would think, by the way, in that case, why don't you just keep your head down, live a quiet life, live in exile? No. She dedicates her life to openly advocating against the United States and on behalf of communist causes and radical Islamist causes for many years. Let's not forget, she literally began her political career back in 2016, advocating on behalf of the early release of actual ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorists.